Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Perf Roundtable. Today we're running a different format to what we've usually done in the past. Today we're going Q&A style based off questions that we've collected from Instagram in the past week. And starting off, we've got Skanky Joe asks, differences between programming of masters lifters compared to juniors and opens lifters.
Thank you, Joe.
What do we reckon?
Dude, I think, in my opinion, we're not really. Let's not consider and separate junior lifters, open lifters, masters lifters. I think that we look more at like training age, right?
Yeah,
That's where I go when I think about it. Rather than like just because this person's old, they're going to be more beat up. Like, no, not particularly. They may have some more life things that have happened leading up to this point because they've matured and done more, but it doesn't mean that their training is vastly different just because of their age. If their training age is relatively the same as if we get like a junior or an open lifter as well.
yeah,
Yeah,
So
lifting knowledge
I
is going to
don't
be
think
very important.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a huge discrepancy. There isn't for me in the way that I program it. There
not
may be
really.
some more down periods as well, depending on the master lifter and their actual life as well and what they have going on. A lot of them have families that they got to look after. They work full-time jobs, which is a bit different to a junior lifter who
Yeah,
obviously doesn't have a family that they're providing for or working for, and also doesn't potentially have like a full-time job that they've got to adhere to as well. So they can have less time constraints than like a master's lifter, but that's just talking about lifestyle, not age.
for sure. I haven't really anything. I think anything I say with it is probably anecdotal anyway, because it's all based off that how that human responds to the program that you're delivering them, or as Steve said, their lifestyle factors as well.
Yeah, like it very much depends, right? Like classifying just masters compared to juniors opens is not considering like training age, the lifestyle that comes with being a masters lifter. Like
Yeah,
it's more likely that obviously someone who's a masters lifter will have more responsibilities that we need to account for. I know
yep,
Steve has mentioned in the past, like you've got people that like do shift work, right? Obviously, you're not going to have a junior that's most likely that's going to be doing that. And so you'd program in a sense where you kind of give rein to the lifter.
Yeah.
Um, I see that being a potential difference, but in terms of like rep schemes and things like that, I don't think there's much of a difference in response.
No,
I mean,
there isn't.
anecdotally, I've found that some of my masters lifters can lift at a higher intensity for longer, but not as much volume. But that's anecdotally, and again based on the person themselves.
Hmm.
I found that I've got a couple of my guys who can repeatedly hit RP9s week to week on their lifts, particularly squats, or hit a one really heavy back down set, but they don't really respond to adding volume. That's what I've found.
Interesting. I mean,
But
like
that's anecdotally, and I don't know
yeah,
whether or not that's just the person. Does that make sense?
yeah, for sure. Like I coach Skanky Joe as well, and I think the thing that I'm most sensitive compared to say my younger lifters is, for example, when we do come to a point where there's like a flare up or an injury, we're more sensitive to it, just
Yeah.
because obviously as we start to age, like recovery might be a factor, and that's
Yep.
something that we do need to consider. So when it does reach a point where there are flare ups, we tend to take the more conservative route.
Yep.
I'm more cautious to not push, even despite of say like a comp prep where in the past, like Steve has told me, like, you just need to push, like hold on. There's still that to an extent, but it's not as aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I found some of them can't run for long block lengths, and that I've almost had block lengths that have been really pushed in intensity until um until they can't keep going. So I will run higher intensity RPE prescription for shorter periods of time, because they can't handle the sets of 5 or 6 back downs for very long. That's what I found. I've got 2 people in mind, and one of them in mind, Peter Day, has made really good progress on that. She doesn't do. She's got 2 hard days of the week, which is her Monday and her Thursday, and the other days are pretty easy. And that Monday and that Thursday are very high intensity.
Yeah. So she can push quite hard, but you also need to ensure that she's recovering, right? Can't be like 2 back-to-back hard days, for example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess we could jump into the next question coming from Eldlifts. When is it appropriate to use fixed versus reactive block lengths?
Okay, I'm big on like it's gonna be reactive no matter what, right? Like we do have a fixed block length in mind when we do it, but we still have a reactive mindset to what we're doing as well. So it's like, okay, we want this person to run 5 or 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, whatever we're thinking in our head. That's already there, right? I have that in my mind when I'm writing anyone's, original block up or their training up. I know where I'm trying to go with it. Sometimes we just don't make it. Or sometimes we get there and we're like, fuck, we have so much momentum right now. Let's go one more. But at the same time, like that's come to bite me in the ass before too, right? Like I've gone, let's go one more, and it's just like, oh no, we shouldn't have done that. We should have just started again with all the momentum that we had, and then just like pushed it. But we learned from that. So at the same time, that's reactive in itself. I'm responding to what's happened from me going one more and acknowledging that and learning from the mistake that I made, which I thought was a good choice, but ended up not being a good choice. And then not making that bad decision again. So that's still reactive, I believe. I believe it's kind of always reactive. We'll write a fixed block length in an ideal world. We obviously program weekly, and I was talking to you about this recently, Kelly. Like, we obviously it'd be nice to be able to write everyone's blocks out as, and just like feed it to them for his 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And in an ideal world, everything runs perfectly, and they can just like go through that. And what us who program weekly, we're thinking like that when we do it, right? But there's something that's gonna happen. So even when you program someone a fixed block length, there's still that reactive programming method that's happening throughout that fixed block. So let's talk about someone who programs 4 or 5 weeks. I guarantee that they probably still do jump in and make manipulations throughout that 4 or 5 weeks, which is reactive programming.
Yeah, I think it's more like once you have a solid base of knowledge on the person, you can, as I was talking about yesterday, working backwards from a competition and really predicting what's going to happen in each block. I think that's, in my mind, that's probably the extent that I'd go towards with writing fixed block lengths. Just having it working back from a comp, going, all right, we're 12 weeks out, this person runs 4-week blocks. On this first block, the aim is this, the second block, the aim is that, and then the third block, we're peaking hard. I think that's pretty much the extent of it for me, anyway.
Yep.
I would go to.
Yeah. Only time I would use a fixed block length is when we have time constraints, right? Like you said, we're 12 weeks out or like 7 weeks out. So say if you're 7 weeks out
Mm-hmm.
and this lifter is like, he peaks in 4 weeks, right? How are you going to time that? You could fix the 3 weeks and then you just let them run the final 4 weeks. But you don't get to that point by fixing everything first. You kind of have to let the variables play out. Right.
The thing about that is 7 weeks is the fixed object, not 3, not 4, 7.
7.
Exactly.
So you got to make it work. You got to make it work in 7 weeks. And I think it's like also understanding the heuristics of your lifter as well, right? So like if you've got 7 weeks, you don't necessarily have to run 3 and then 4. You could know them and you could run the whole 7, and you could run a couple of mini deloads midway through each, every couple of weeks there. They might only need a decrease on their secondary deadlift day, and then come back the next week and go, oh, I feel like fresh, I'm ready to go. So, you don't necessarily have to go 3 weeks, stop, 4 weeks. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
But that again, you'd have to really understand. You have to understand what your lifter can respond to based on, time to taper and stuff like that by doing that.
Being reactive definitely gives you like first-hand knowledge. If you it's
Yeah.
everything, you won't figure it out. Like you're fitting the lifter into your box versus you going out and trying to figure out the lifter.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Anthony Tran asks, how do you keep your head up when you're injured?
Okay, this is hard, right? I obviously deal with a lot going through things at the moment. I've gone through a lot of things as an athlete. So I think the biggest thing for me is finding what you can do, taking the wins. Okay, so we fixate when we get into this when we're injured, right, or we have some sort of flare up or something that's directly affecting our ability to train at the capacity that we want to compete. We fixate on that moment and where we are. So I found myself in this morning, right? Just because I have like a little bit, my leg's a bit sore, right? Okay, whatever. But I fixate in that moment because I'm a human being, right? And it sucks. It fucking sucks because all I want to do is I want to lift heavy weight and I'm going to the biggest competition of my life. And I start second guessing myself, thinking about what's going on. But if we forget, I forget that 2 fucking weeks ago, I squatted 270 like it was nothing again. I also, the next day I pulled 250 for a double, like there was an empty barbell. This was just 2 weeks ago. But we get so fixated in the moment and what we're able to do in that very moment that we forget. So I'm only able to, I sit down and go, this fucking sucks. We walked into Kelly, I said, fucking annoyed, my leg hurts, it's frustrating. But then, I also, and I didn't detach myself from that situation after I've had more time to think about it, and then I'm like, you know what? 2 weeks ago, I was fine. I know I'm going to be fine. It's going to be okay. And we always come out of these situations eventually. It's just sometimes they linger. For me at the moment, like I've been like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. But I feel like I've been saying that for a very long time now. But I know it will be, but I do realize that in that moment, it's just about taking the wins that you can. So it's like small things for me. Okay. So I've noticed that, when I'm going on a walk in the afternoon or in the evening, it hurts less than what it used to. Yeah. When I'm just sitting down, it hurts less than what it used to. When I'm doing things like little things, it hurt less. I used to, on a Friday, right, leading into nationals, driving home from the gym on a Friday afternoon was almost unbearable to the point where like I needed to almost fucking want to get out of my car because I couldn't sit down any longer because my hip was that jammed up and I was incapable of like getting into a position that felt comfortable and not painful. That I have wins. I can drive. I get home and I'm like, oh shit, I didn't feel a thing. So they're long-term things. And then we look at the small acute injuries, and in the moment it sucks, but it's like we got to take the wins and realize that not everything lasts forever.
Mm-hmm.
You've done a lot of mindset work in the last year on it, though. You can tell a lot. You've really been able to sit back and take the wins more, and had to not so much teach yourself, but you've matured into being able to do that. And as a lifter, you can see that it's a process.
Yeah, the hard thing that I notice is like it's very hard. Even now, it's just like not being able to train hard and work hard. That's the most frustrating thing. I probably learnt the most about my mindset around injuries when I broke my arm because that was a very big, significant injury. That was something where I couldn't actually lift at all. So I wouldn't say the injury itself I learned anything because it was frustrating at the time, the period that happened, that made me not able to go to my first Worlds. A lot of things happened from that and I couldn't actually lift. But I learned a lot because within 6 months, I was back on the platform PRing my total. So these things that I run into now, or these issues that I run into now, I know that this is going to be okay because you've literally dealt with the worst possible thing, which is breaking a fucking bone. That you could have, and it's going to be fine. It's just these little things also linger for longer for me because they don't completely stop me for training, which is something that I kind of need as well.
Yeah, I think the thing with powerlifting though is like what you just said about putting it in perspective and doing what you can do and taking the small wins. It is a sport that you can do that. Like it's not like rugby league where you might get hit in the face so bad. Like remember that game that JT played with a broken arm? You get what I
Yeah.
mean? Like in powerlifting, it's like, it's okay. You can still do X, Y, Z. Man, like he was out. Like he played that game and then he was out. Like there was no coming back from that. Whereas in powerlifting, it's like you broke your arm. Yep, you came back and you started again really quickly, and then you could still squat, you could still hit machines, you could still do all of those things. It's people need to realize, lifters and coaches need to realize that it's quite an easy sport to work around injuries. You can work with them. You don't need them to work against you.
Yeah, for sure. Because we can still move, right? You
still
don't have
move.
an inability to move. So I could still could high bar squat when I was at the worst of my injuries, SSB squat.
Yep.
I couldn't competition squat at the time, but now I can get back to that. It's like I've just had to progress my way there. So I'm taking the wins and being able to squat, being able to pick one set of deadlift up off the floor for 4 weeks. They were wins. Gradually being able to come down lower on the blocks on my deadlifts is like taking the wins as the wins come, and not just fixating on where you are in that moment, because where you are isn't where you're always going to be. Although it's very hard because we do live very much so in the moment. But if you can just like kind of look away, and rather than thinking like, but I was here, I like to think like, yeah, I was there, and that was so like, it's like having a bad training day, right? We have a bad training day. We go, what the fuck? Like 2 weeks ago, I could squat, for myself, 2 weeks ago, I could squat 270 kilos. Now I'm struggling with 250 on my back or something. So we're having a bad training day. It's kind of similar to like an injury. Yeah, 2 weeks ago, you could squat 270 kilos. You have not gotten weaker.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't just
okay.
you don't just automatically. And that's another thing about powerlifting. You don't just automatically get weak.
No. If anything, these injuries sometimes occurred from an overuse or something like that, or you've just gone too far past that threshold. So that's why these things occurred. So it's being able to acknowledge, also while taking the wins, the small wins that we're talking about, it's also being able to acknowledge probably why this might have happened, and then being able to work from that again, so you don't end up back here.
Definitely.
I think the thing about powerlifting is like it's a very objective sport. You can tangibly see whether or not you're making progress, right? Just by the weight of the bar going up, but that can work against you. And then if you get stuck in that, it's like, oh, my numbers are going down. I'm a terrible human being, or and you attach yourself to that number going lower and lower. Whereas in another sport, it's like you can't tell if you're making progress, but then the fact that you can't tell can also keep you hopeful because you're trying to just get back to performing again.
I think also too, like I think we're still humans in general are still stuck on this mindset that you're not getting stronger unless the load on the bar goes up weekly, and it's just not true. So like, I was talking to Steve about one of his lifters last night who's quite sensitive to fatigue, and he can go from deadlifting 230 1 week to 250 the next week, back to 220 the week after. He's not weaker. He's just the fatigue's caught up a little bit. You probably know exactly who I'm talking about. But you know what I mean? It's the same with injury, right? Just because you had a prep where you may not have had as much momentum as you wanted to, you may not have hit your last deadlift, you may not have done XYZ. That doesn't mean that you're not going to hit it on the platform if you've done it before. Yeah. It's just the way that it's just the way, especially when you're getting to the higher level. Especially when you're getting to the higher level, you cannot discount anyone based on what they've been doing. And Steve showed that when he competed at Effectus, and again he showed that when he competed Canberra. Was it Canberra?
Canberra.
Both of those times you were carrying an injury, but you got enough work done to perform.
Yeah.
We can discount nationals because that was just not enough work done, but that most people would be going through in powerlifting the type of level of the injury it was at the time that Steve had that before those two competitions, and he got enough work done to perform. That doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you're pushing too far or doing too much or not listening to the injury that was occurring. It just means that you got enough work done to perform. And I think at the higher level, it's important that lifters do, and coaches do acknowledge that, because, you know, if a lifter's coming in and they've been totaling 500 their last 3-4 competitions, and they're carrying a slight injury and they only total 480 on training, there's no reason why they can't total past 500 on the platform.
Yeah, but it's baseline stimulus that we could still work with when someone's sore.
Yeah, baseline stimulus. Yeah, that's where I'm going with that. I guess I'm just talking about the mindset around it. Within, you know, if you've got a lifter that, you know, their peak doesn't go too well, or they don't hit the numbers that they're supposed to in the peak, but they hit those numbers the block before. You know, in my mind, you know, me 3 years ago would have gone, oh well, we're not going to perform on the platform. I just don't think like that anymore.
Yeah.
If your mindset is right, and you're able to, you know, get it right. I'm not saying push through pain. I'm saying if you understand your lifter and you're still able to peak your lifter with enough workload, there's no reason why they can't perform.
Yeah, as long as they're not detrained, you have something you can pull back from.
That's the thing where you play with them. If they accidentally get detrained, then it's harder.
Yeah. I think, well, yeah, obviously when you're injured and you can't get through as much workload, I think that's the mental challenge. Like Steve said, like you just want to be able to train heavy and you want to get the work in.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously there's always something that you can do. If it's not the comp pattern, you can do a variation. And if it's not a variation of the injured muscle, then you can always work on something else.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Sweet. Next question. Coming from Anthony Lee, how big of a role does genetics play in determining what goals are attainable in powerlifting? Another athlete mindset question.
So genetics, they do play a role, right, to an extent. Obviously, like someone's genetic potential, it can be extremely high. If we look at someone like what those guys are doing over in the States, right, they're fucking freaks. So their genetic potential is so high, but for the most part, like powerlifting just rewards the people that hang around. I'm going to be completely honest with that. Like,
it's a long game sport, man.
Yeah, there's genetic potential that can get someone to a certain point really, really fast. But if they don't like the fact that it slows down in progression, and they don't like the fact that training gets harder, as I'm not going to say it gets harder because it's still the same. It doesn't get physically harder, but it gets harder to be able to hit goals and progress and hit PRs, that all that sort of stuff. These tangible things that Danny touched on before, they become harder to achieve.
Yeah.
Because this is the way that the sport's kind of laid out. But if you're someone that is able to kind of hang around and still have that mindset of like, I'm just going to keep going. It's boring. It's monotonous. You know, it's just that's what the sport is. And it's like, we're doing the same repetitive kind of thing all the time with the same kind of results and effects. But if we're slowly just creeping, you will bypass that person with those phenomenal genetics based on the fact that they probably just might stop.
Their mindset's not the same. The more high level of athletes that I'm working with in this game, their mindset is different.
Yeah.
It's a completely different view of the sport. It's a completely different not enjoyment, because everyone enjoys the sport because it is a sport, but it's a completely different way of looking at how that athlete treats training and how that athlete treats the end goal. And the end goal, they, like as Meg said, and it's one of your sayings as well, keep the goal a goal.
Yeah, 100%.
The goal doesn't change.
Yeah, like looking at the question, right? It's like you're trying to pin genetics as the limiting factor in determining what goals you can and can't achieve. But I mean, like this just gets like, it's not even science or whatever. It's just comes down to goal setting and being ambitious. Like if your goal is to be the best, your genetics isn't going to be the thing that's limiting you. It's the fact that you might give up in the process because there's so much resistance to that. Like trying to be the best, or like I'm assuming that's a big goal of a lot of people. Like there's not much there that's going to be limiting you. Like everyone's going to go through a period where it sucks. You're going to get injured.
Oh yeah.
Like training's going to plateau, right? But none of that has anything to do with genetics. That's just the way trying to approach mastery is. And that goes for any industry, any sport. Like if you then throw in the towel and say, oh, it was my genetics, it's not genetics, it's the fact that your mentality has given yourself up.
Yeah,
So,
one of
100%.
I think we can go back to older level athletes because we do have a couple of masters on our roster that are not masters one who continue to PR at every competition they do because of their work ethic and their mindset and being able to troubleshoot issues in terms of, okay, this doesn't work, let's try something else. And I believe that happens. When I first met Steve, he told me that anybody can get stronger. And it's very easy for coaches and people in general when they first start out going, oh, that person's just reached their strength potential. Or that person's program, not the program, it's just their strength potential. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing. And it's just layers, layers of what that individual is willing to go to get stronger.
Yeah, 100%.
That's all it is.
Hasn't been created yet.
The ceiling isn't created, and you can see that, and we will see that at Sheffield. The ceiling isn't created, and it hasn't been. What is getting better are things like mindset, recovery, programming skills, individualization. All of these things continue to get better and better, and that's just how sport evolves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any sport evolve like that. The biggest thing, and I'll go back to it again, is the difference between the guys who step on that world stage and who win are the ones with the mindset. It's literally the mindset. Like at the end of the prep going to nationals, I did not realize how sick Meg was until after. She didn't even tell me. She was like, oh yeah, I'm not well. I'm a bit sick today. I can't really breathe. She's on a ventilator every night.
That's what we're like.
Just so she could get through the next day.
It's also the same as like I didn't really tell Sean the same as the extent of my leg injury until after. I was like, this is pretty bad, man. He's like, I could. He's like, why didn't you tell me? And I was like, because you would have stopped me. And I was not being fucking stopped. There's no way I was going to get stopped in that moment. I had a job to do, and I was on a mission. And I know, like from a coach as well, that what I would have done with an athlete in that point, and if they were to tell me the extent. But if that athlete is willing to push and they're not going to tell me, then I'm not going to say that was good of them. I'm not like saying that what I did or highlighting that or saying that it was good, but that's what I needed to do. I needed to just be like, this is me and this is what I'm doing. And if I tell you that, bro, I can barely get out of fucking bed in the morning. I can't walk. It hurts to drive. Everything hurts. It hurts with a barbell on my back. It hurts the body weight squat. If I tell you that, then you're going to adjust things. I need a peak that I'm going to follow.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I went out, did what I did, and then I told him after that I have tear in my hamstring, but we're good. We're going to Worlds.
I guess the answer to that question is genetics do matter if the sport is a sport of recreation for you. But if you want to get to that level where you're standing on that world stage or you are someone who is beating other people, then it comes back to those factors of recovery and mindset and what you're willing to put your body through to make sure that you continue to reach the goal that you've set yourself.
Yeah. Genetics has absolutely zero role in you adding 2.5 kilos to your current PR.
Yeah.
If
you have phenomenal genetics, right, you probably shouldn't be doing powerlifting. You should be doing a sport to give you money.
Definitely go and do something else that that it's not as boring. Such a boring sport.
All right. Next question. Do Marcha asks, what would you do on comp day if you get red lights for bench depth?
Well, probably shouldn't have been training to the standard where you were worried about depth, but it's a bit rough. I mean, we've all got our own personal opinions on this rule. I mean, I'm not a lifter, so I'll leave it to you guys what you guys think you would do, and I think I'll speak as a coach.
Yep. Okay, so from an athlete point of view, obviously, like I had the obviously initially it was like I'm just gonna wait to see how this is rules. I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing, And then once I seen the way that it was judged in Europe, because I'm based in Europe, because I know Europe is a lot more stricter than what they are across most of the rest of the world, that there's a standard that I need to get to be able to get white lights at World, which is where I'm going. So then I had to adjust what I was doing, which is when it took a big forefront of my mind, like the rule itself. If we're talking about the question itself, what I would do if I get red lights for bench depth on competition, like I will come back out and try and get better depth the next attempt. I don't really, I'm not quite sure how to answer that because it's trying to like, you know, I guess like what I've done is I'm trying to make myself undeniable so I don't put myself in that position, which should be the same with squat depth.
Yeah.
And, you know, deadlift lockouts itself, you know, I had this discussion with Danny last week. It was like, we can't just keep outputting now. We need to hit depth. This is how squat depth is now. It needs to be undeniable all the time. Actually, we can squat high in output, right? And squat more weight each week, but you're not hitting the competition standard. So why should we be doing that with bench now?
Definitely. The bench rule is just a bit rough because, you know, and we've all got our opinions on it. It is a bit rough because of how variable it has been country to country. So, you know, it is pretty easy to undeniably hit squat depth. But sometimes bench depth, I think there's a couple more variables, but as I said, it's a new rule. Anything can happen. We don't really know. It's still going through the teething issues, but as Steve said, if you miss it on the first one, flat back the second.
Yeah. It's going to be, everyone's going to be going through it for the first time as well in their first comp this year. So like,
don't open heavy.
Yeah, everyone don't open heavy.
Don't open too heavy. That's the big one.
Like this is the first comp where bench depth has been called, right? So like, let's say this rule keeps going for years on end. Like, you don't need to send this very first comp that you do. So open light.
Yeah.
Light enough where you can flat back on the second if you do get called the way you regularly bench, and then adjust from there.
Yep. Yeah, it's been a bit rough, but we'll see how we go.
Yeah, sure. Last one we've got Alex Lucas asks, attempt selection and thought processes behind deciding on openers and seconds, etc. I think this comes down to whether or not you've got competition, right? Like if you're competing on your own, really the only goal should be to go 9 for 9. And if you're in a position towards the end on your thirds that you can go for a PR, like go for it.
Yeah, I think the same. You know, 9 for 9 is the goal, whether you're in competition or not. If you're in that competition, 9 for 9 becomes more of the fucking goal, because if you miss a lift, you've opened the door, you've given it away. You've either opened the door and given it away, or you've pulled yourself out of that competition now because you needed to make every single attempt to actually be a part of that conversation of that competition. So I think no matter the competition or what you're doing, the goal should always just be to make attempts and go 9 for 9. It shouldn't be anything else, because that sets yourself up the most. If you put yourself in a position though where your last deadlift is, you know, 2.5 each way of like yes and no, but like this is to win the competition, then that's when your attempt selection might change, right? Because we're not being on the conservative competition PR 9 from 9 kind of mindset there. We're like, okay, no, let's get the dub, let's go for the win, let's fucking go all in and cash our chips. Let's go.
I guess getting to that point though is like, I guess the question's asking, what's the thought process behind getting to openers and seconds then? I think it's like, how conservative or how aggressive could you be on your opener then?
It's working back, right? We work back from where our planned third attempt is, right? That's what we should be doing. And if we're working back from a planned third attempt, which should kind of be somewhat conservative in a way, it shouldn't always be like if we're having like a guess third attempt of, you should be able to do this on meet day, then you're going in with the wrong approach. It should be a planned third attempt that we're pretty well, like 90 to 100% confident that this person can hit this on the day, right? That's where we should be, and we work backwards from there. Whether that be in even jumps or like a bigger jump into a small jump to the third, we should always be have that planned third attempt that we work backwards from.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that
Don't put anything on the barbell you don't know if you've got or not.
Yeah, never.
yeah.
Simple as that. So whatever you've done in training, unless you're pulling for the win, that's it.
Especially like a first competition, like it's
Yeah.
better to leave kilos on the platform, I believe, in a first competition, because you build more confidence, you feel better about it. You go, fuck, let's do another one in like 8-10 weeks. Hit the numbers that I could have hit. We learn from, okay, this person responded really, really well from the taper that we wrote and the peak that we wrote. So we did leave some kilos on the platform.
Definitely. And I know that the person who's asked this is doing the Perf Cup in the first session in the morning. So take some advice and go 9 from 9 and build your total, man.
Yeah, there's definitely no pressure to set yourself up for failure. There's no need for that. Set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
Right, for sure. That covers it. Thanks, guys, for giving in your questions. In the future, whether we come up with ideas that we are inspired by and want to talk about, or whether we run another Q&A, feel free to share or submit your questions. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Wait.